Do not judge a person by the silence around them, because sometimes the quietest soul is the one everyone has been waiting for. The words came from Clara Bennett as she stood alone beneath the cold white lights of Westbridge Medical Center, holding a small paper bag with a few personal belongings and a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. For 3 years, Clara had worked as a surgical assistant in the hospital, never seeking attention, never asking for praise. She was the person who arrived before sunrise, organized every detail, and stayed late to make sure every patient received kindness. Yet on this morning, she was standing outside the operating room doors, told to wait like a stranger in a place she had dedicated herself to. The hallway was filled with important guests, senior doctors, military officials, and hospital executives. Everyone seemed to know something Clara did not. She watched as people whispered quietly, glancing in her direction before quickly looking away. Maybe she should leave, one voice murmured. She does not belong in this situation. Clara lowered her eyes, not because she believed them, but because she had learned that dignity did not need to fight for attention. She remembered the patient who had changed everything. His name was Nathan Whitmore, a respected former military leader and one of the most influential figures in the country. Weeks earlier, Clara had been assigned to help his family during a difficult medical situation. While others saw a powerful man surrounded by status and reputation, Clara saw someone who needed patience, understanding, and genuine care. She never treated him like a symbol. She treated him like a person. That simple act stayed with everyone who witnessed it. But Clara never expected anything in return. She believed kindness was valuable even when nobody noticed. Across the city, Nathan's family and closest colleagues were preparing for a moment that would change Clara's life forever. The people who had dismissed her had no idea that the person they ignored was the only one Nathan had specifically asked to see. As the minutes passed, Clara tightened her grip on the small paper bag and prepared to walk away. She had already accepted that some doors would never open for her. Then suddenly, the entire hallway became quiet. Several distinguished guests entered the medical wing, their presence causing everyone to step aside. Among them were respected generals who rarely appeared without a serious purpose. The hospital director immediately approached them, nervous and surprised. "May I ask who you are looking for?" he asked. The answer came without hesitation. "We are here for Clara Bennett." The hallway froze. Clara looked up, confused, wondering if they had mistaken her for someone else. The people who had ignored her moments before exchanged uncertain looks. The woman they believed was invisible was suddenly the person everyone had been searching for. And behind those operating room doors was the truth that would reveal why. The hallway remained silent after the generals spoke Clara Bennett's name. For a moment, she wondered if she had misunderstood. The people around her looked at her with the same confusion she felt inside. Clara was used to being overlooked, not being the center of attention. She slowly stepped forward, still holding the small paper bag in her hands. "I think there may be a mistake," she said softly. The hospital director immediately smiled with nervous uncertainty. "Miss Bennett, they specifically asked for you." Those words felt heavier than she expected. For years, Clara had worked behind the scenes, making sure others received recognition while she quietly carried the responsibility. She never imagined that the most powerful people in the room would know her name. One of the generals looked at her with respect, not the polite kind given out of obligation, but the kind earned through genuine admiration. "Clara Bennett, we have been trying to find you since this morning," he said. "There is someone inside who has been waiting for you." Clara looked toward the operating room doors. Behind them was Nathan Whitmore, the man whose reputation reached far beyond the hospital walls. A decorated leader, a respected figure, and someone many people considered impossible to approach. But Clara remembered something different. She remembered a man who had quietly thanked her for taking the time to listen. She remembered how he noticed small acts of kindness that others ignored. Several days earlier, before this moment in the hallway, Clara had entered Nathan's room during one of his most difficult mornings. The medical team was busy discussing schedules, procedures, and responsibilities. Everyone was focused on what needed to be done. Clara noticed something else. She noticed that Nathan seemed tired of being treated like a title instead of a person. She placed a warm cup of coffee beside him and simply asked, "How are you really doing today?" It was a simple question, but nobody else had asked it. Nathan looked surprised. Most people approached him with expectations, requests, or careful words chosen because of his position. Clara spoke to him with honesty. She did not know about his influence outside the hospital. She did not care about his reputation. To her, he was simply someone who needed compassion. That moment stayed with him. Now, standing outside the operating room, Clara began to understand why she had been called. The generals were not there because of her job title. They were there because of the difference she had made when nobody was watching. But before Clara could enter, a familiar voice stopped her. It belonged to one of the senior staff members who had dismissed her earlier. "Wait," he said, suddenly uncertain. "Are you saying she is the person he requested?" The general turned calmly toward him. "Yes. She is the only person Nathan Whitmore specifically asked to see." The words traveled through the hallway like a quiet storm. Clara looked at the operating room doors again, feeling a mixture of concern and disbelief. She had never searched for recognition. She had only done what she believed was right. Yet sometimes, the kindness given in silence returns when it is needed most. And now, the person behind those doors was about to reveal a truth that would change how everyone saw Clara Bennett forever. The first light of morning slipped through the trees, painting the hidden valley in soft gold. Sarah sat beside the small fire, watching the injured wolf rest beneath the blanket she had wrapped around him. The strange creature no longer looked frightened, but she could still feel the mystery surrounding him. Every instinct inside her whispered that this was not an ordinary wolf. There was something ancient in his eyes, something that carried the weight of a forgotten story. She had spent her entire life being told that her kindness was a weakness. Yet here she was, once again choosing compassion when everyone else had chosen to walk away. The forest remained silent, but Sarah felt a presence watching from beyond the trees. She turned quickly, her heart tightening. "Who is there?" she called softly. No answer came, only the sound of leaves moving with the morning breeze. She looked back at the wolf and noticed something she had missed before. Around his neck was a small silver pendant hidden beneath his fur. The symbol carved into it was unfamiliar, but the craftsmanship was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not something a common creature would carry. Sarah reached out carefully, not wanting to frighten him. The moment her fingers touched the pendant, a strange warmth traveled through her hand. The wolf opened his eyes. For a brief moment, she felt as if he understood every word she had never spoken. "You are scared too, are you not?" she whispered. "Everyone sees what they want to see. They never ask what is underneath." The wolf remained still, but his gaze softened. Sarah lowered her eyes, remembering the faces of those who had laughed at her. The whispers, the judgment, the endless reminders that she was only an omega and nothing more. She had believed them for years. But standing there in the quiet forest, protecting a life that others had abandoned, she felt something changing inside her. A voice from the past echoed in her mind. Her grandmother had once told her that the gentlest hearts often carried the strongest light. At the time, Sarah had thought it was only a comforting story. Now, she wondered if it had always been the truth. Hours passed before the sound of approaching footsteps broke the peaceful silence. Sarah immediately stood between the wolf and the strangers, ready to protect the creature she had promised not to abandon. But when the figures stepped into the clearing, they did not look like hunters or villagers. They wore dark royal cloaks, and every movement showed discipline and authority. The person leading them stopped the moment he saw Sarah. His expression changed from suspicion to surprise. His eyes moved toward the wolf, then returned to her. "You have no idea what you have done," he said quietly. Sarah held her ground. "I only helped someone who needed help." The stranger studied her for a long moment. There was something in his silence that made the entire forest feel different. Then he lowered his head slightly, as if showing respect. "That is exactly why you were chosen." Sarah froze. Before she could ask what he meant, the wounded wolf slowly rose. The air around him shifted, and the impossible truth that had been hidden beneath the night began to reveal itself. The girl who had been ignored by everyone had unknowingly saved the one person the entire kingdom was searching for. The morning mist still covered the ancient forest when Elara opened her eyes inside the small shelter she had built beneath the silver pine trees. The quiet warmth of the injured wolf beside her was the only comfort in a world that had spent years telling her she did not belong. She had expected fear, rejection, and loneliness. She had never expected to find a creature that looked at her as if she mattered. The wolf watched her silently, its golden eyes following every movement as she prepared a simple bowl of herbs and fresh water. "You do not have to be afraid," Elara whispered softly. "I know what it feels like when everyone sees you as something less." The words escaped before she could stop them. She looked away, remembering the whispers from her old pack, the cruel smiles, and the endless moments when she was treated like a burden instead of a person. But the wolf did not move away. Instead, it lowered its head and stayed close, as if promising that she was no longer alone. Far beyond the trees, the royal scouts searched through the valley. The disappearance of the mysterious black wolf had shaken the entire kingdom, but no one knew the truth hidden beneath the moonlit forest. The creature Elara had rescued was not an ordinary wolf. He carried a secret that could change the fate of every pack in the northern lands. Yet inside the small shelter, he was simply a wounded soul who had found kindness when he expected nothing from the world. Elara carefully changed the cloth around his injury, her hands gentle despite the exhaustion in her body. She did not notice the strange warmth that surrounded her touch, or the faint glow that appeared for only a moment before disappearing. She believed she was only helping someone in need. She did not know that her compassion was awakening something ancient. When the wolf finally stood, Elara stepped back in surprise. He was larger than before, stronger, almost carrying the presence of someone who belonged to a world far beyond her own. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elara felt a strange connection she could not explain. It was not fear. It was recognition. Then the sound of distant footsteps reached the shelter. Elara immediately moved in front of the wolf, protecting him without thinking. Her heart raced, but she refused to run. She had spent her whole life being told she was weak. Yet when someone else needed her, she always found courage. The approaching figures stopped at the edge of the clearing. Their expressions changed the moment they saw the wolf standing beside her. They did not look at Elara with pity anymore. They looked at her with disbelief, because they knew something she did not. The creature she had protected was not lost. He was the one everyone in the kingdom had been searching for. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the forest floor, the forgotten Omega stood beside a secret powerful enough to rewrite her destiny forever. The clearing fell silent as the strangers stepped closer, their eyes fixed not on Elara, but on the black wolf standing beside her. She felt the change in the air immediately. The same people who had walked through the forest with confidence now stood frozen, as if they had discovered something impossible. Elara tightened her grip on the small cloth in her hands, unsure why their attention suddenly felt heavier than the cold morning air. "Who are you?" one of the royal guards finally asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Elara looked behind her at the wolf, then back at the visitors. "I found him injured in the forest," she answered quietly. "I only helped him." The guard exchanged a glance with the others. Those words seemed to surprise them even more. Helped him? As if the most powerful creature in the northern territories was someone who simply needed kindness. Elara did not understand their reaction. She had never been interested in titles, crowns, or power. She knew what it felt like to be ignored, and she could not leave another living soul to suffer the same loneliness. The wolf moved slowly forward, standing between Elara and the guards. But there was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet certainty. The guards immediately lowered their heads in respect. Elara noticed the gesture and felt confusion rise in her chest. Why would they show such honor to a wounded wolf? The answer came moments later when a deep voice echoed through the trees. Enough. The sound was calm, but it carried a presence that made everyone stop. The figure who stepped into the clearing wore a dark royal cloak marked with the symbol of the Northern Kingdom. His expression was serious, but his eyes softened when they found the black wolf. "Your Majesty," the guards said together. Elara's breath caught. She looked from the king to the wolf beside her, her mind struggling to understand what her eyes were showing her. The Alpha King had not been lost. He had not been defeated. He had been hidden from the world, and she had been the one person who cared for him without knowing his name. The king approached slowly, his gaze resting on Elara. For years, she had been looked at as the weakest member of every room she entered. People had measured her by her rank, her quiet nature, and the things she could not do. But now, standing beneath the ancient trees, she felt something different. She felt seen. "You knew nothing about him," the king said softly. Elara lowered her eyes. "No, I only knew he needed help." A silence followed those words. The guards watched carefully, waiting for the king's reaction. But instead of anger or suspicion, the Alpha King looked at her with something close to admiration. Because in a world where many searched for power, this Omega had chosen compassion. She had protected someone without expecting a reward. And that simple choice had revealed a truth no one could have predicted. The forest had not brought Elara to a wounded wolf by accident. It had brought her to the beginning of a destiny that even the kingdom could not ignore. Elara stood beneath the towering silver pines, still trying to understand the impossible truth unfolding before her. The wolf she had carried through the cold forest, the creature she had protected when everyone else would have walked away, was not just a lost animal. He was the Alpha King himself. The revelation should have frightened her. It should have made her step back, bow her head, and remember the distance between their worlds. But instead, her first thought was simple. She wondered if he was feeling better. The king noticed the confusion in her eyes and the kindness that remained there. It was something he had not expected. For years, people had approached him because of his crown, his power, and the respect attached to his name. Almost no one looked beyond those things. But Elara had never known his title. She had only seen someone who needed help. "You were not afraid?" the Alpha King asked. Elara lowered her gaze for a moment, thinking carefully. "I was afraid," she admitted. "But being afraid does not mean you should ignore someone who is suffering." Her answer left the clearing quiet. The guards exchanged surprised looks. They had heard countless people speak about courage, but few understood it the way this Omega did. Elara had no sword, no royal blood, and no position that gave her influence. Yet she had shown a strength that could not be measured by rank. The Alpha King looked toward the small shelter she had built among the trees. Inside were simple supplies, dried herbs, and the remains of the careful meals she had prepared while caring for him. Nothing about the place showed luxury. Everything showed patience. "You stayed here with me?" he asked. Elara nodded. "You could not walk away. Someone had to make sure you recovered." The words were ordinary, but they carried a meaning the king could not ignore. She had offered him the one thing many powerful people had forgotten how to give: genuine care. As the group prepared to leave the forest, Elara felt a strange sadness. She had spent so much of her life believing she was invisible. Now, suddenly, everyone was watching her. She wondered if they saw her kindness or only the connection she had unknowingly created with the ruler of the kingdom. The Alpha King seemed to notice her hesitation. "You believe this changes how you are seen," he said quietly. Elara looked away. "People will always find a reason to judge someone like me." The king studied her expression. He saw the years of disappointment hidden behind her calm voice. He saw someone who had learned to expect less because the world had given her less. But he also saw something stronger, a heart that had remained gentle despite everything. "Then they will have to learn again," he replied. Elara looked back at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. The journey back to the kingdom began beneath a sky painted with golden morning light. For the first time in many years, Elara walked beside others instead of behind them. She did not know what awaited her beyond the forest, and she did not know how the world would react when the forgotten Omega returned with the Alpha King. But deep within her heart, she felt something changing. Not because a king had noticed her, but because, for the first time, she was beginning to believe that she had always been worthy of being seen. The journey back to the Northern Kingdom was unlike anything Elara had ever experienced. She had walked those forest paths many times before, always alone, always unnoticed. But now royal guards traveled beside her, and the Alpha King himself walked near enough that she no longer felt like a shadow following behind others. Still, Elara could not forget who she was in the eyes of the world. An Omega without status. A girl who had spent years being told that kindness was the only thing she had, because she possessed nothing else. As the castle towers appeared beyond the horizon, her heart grew heavier. The grand walls, the endless banners, and the gathering crowds reminded her that this was not her world. The people waiting at the gates had come to see their king return. They had not come to welcome her. Whispers moved through the crowd as soon as they noticed the quiet Omega walking beside him. Some looked curious. Others looked confused. Elara lowered her eyes, prepared for the familiar feeling of being judged. But this time, something was different. The Alpha King stopped walking. The entire courtyard became silent. He turned toward Elara, not toward the nobles, not toward the guards, but toward her. You have spent too long believing you must stand behind others, he said. Elara looked up, surprised by his words. I only did what anyone should have done. The king's expression softened. That is exactly why it matters. Those nearby listened carefully. They had expected a royal announcement filled with power and authority. Instead, they heard a simple truth. The person everyone had ignored was the one who showed compassion when it mattered most. Inside the castle, Elara was given a quiet room overlooking the gardens. It was more beautiful than any place she had ever lived, but the comfort felt unfamiliar. She touched the delicate curtains and the polished wooden furniture, wondering if she truly belonged there. Later that evening, she found the Alpha King standing near the garden beneath the moonlight. He was no longer the mysterious wolf from the forest, but she could still see the same loneliness in his eyes. Do you regret helping me? He asked. Elara shook her head immediately. No, even after knowing who I am. She thought about it for a moment. Your title changed. You did not. The answer surprised him. For so long, people had treated him as a symbol instead of a person. They saw the crown before they saw the heart beneath it. But Elara had done the opposite. She had seen the wounded soul before she ever knew about the throne. A gentle breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of the flowers blooming beneath the moon. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt something close to peace. Yet beyond the castle walls, not everyone.